This is something that happened 2 years ago. I was just heading home after a long day, taking the subway train at Times Square. It was one of those evenings when the train isn't too crowded, so I managed to grab a seat by the window. As we started moving, I plugged in my earphones, trying to unwind a bit. The train was rumbling along, and I was lost in my thoughts, when suddenly my phone rang. I fumbled in my pocket and managed to answer it just in time. It was my friend, Mike. We started chatting about random stuff, work, plans for the weekend, the usual. I was so engrossed in our conversation that I barely noticed the guy sitting across from me. He was dressed kinda shabby, and he seemed really agitated about something. As I was talking to Mike, the guy suddenly got up and started pacing back and forth in the aisle. I could tell he was upset, like really upset. At first, I thought maybe he was having a bad day, we've all been there, but then, he started yelling. I mean, really yelling. He was looking around the train, his eyes scanning each passenger. He was muttering something about his wife being there, accusing people of hiding her or something. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. People started to shift uncomfortably in their seats, and a few were shooting worried glances at each other. I tried my best to focus on Mike's voice on the phone, but it was hard to ignore the scene unfolding in front of me. The guy's rage was escalating, and his words were getting more and more intense. He was convinced that his wife was on that train, and he wasn't about to let it go. He was pointing at random passengers, demanding to know where she was. At one point, he even grabbed a woman's arm, thinking she was his wife. She was terrified and started screaming, which only added to the chaos. The tension on that train was so thick, you could practically taste it. People were anxiously looking at each other, trying to figure out what to do. Some were dialing 911, others were just frozen in their seats, unsure of how to react. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the next station arrived, and the train came to a halt. The subway personnel rushed in, along with a couple of cops. They managed to calm the guy down and eventually escorted him off the train. As he was leaving, he was still shouting, his face red with anger. I hung up with Mike and just sat there, my heart racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. The subway ride resumed, but the atmosphere was still heavy with unease. No one really spoke, and I could tell we were all pretty shaken up by the whole ordeal. Looking back, I still get chills thinking about that incident. It was like a glimpse into someone's unraveling mind, a moment of pure, raw emotion that erupted in the most unexpected place. It's a reminder that you never really know what's going on in someone else's life. I gotta tell you about this downright terrifying thing that happened to me on a train ride. It was a regular night. I was just doing my job, checking up on the train and reminding folks about safety stuff. Little did I know, things were about to get real crazy. I was walking down the aisle, making sure everyone had buckled up and all that, when I noticed a group of guys in the back. They were wearing these masks that gave me the creeps, like something out of a horror movie. I tried not to stare, but they were acting strange, whispering to each other and all. Next thing I know, chaos breaks loose. These guys started tossing things around like they were possessed. I saw one of them with a hammer, smashing windows and seats like it was some kind of sick game. People were screaming and panicking, and I was just frozen, not knowing what to do. I wanted to stop them, but they looked dangerous as all heck. They kept throwing stuff, and folks were crying and begging them to stop. It was like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The train was shaking from all the commotion, and I could hear glass breaking and metal clanging like a symphony of terror. I ain't ashamed to say, fear had me in its grip too. I could see these guys had a plan, and it sure as hell wasn't a good one. It felt like an eternity, but eventually, the train started slowing down as we approached this dark tunnel. I thought maybe, just maybe, it would scare him off, but nope, they didn't even hesitate. As the train entered that pitch-black tunnel, those masked men just disappeared into it, like ghosts or something. The tunnel swallowed them up, and all I could hear were the echoes of their crazed laughter and the sound of the train's wheels echoing in the darkness. The train finally came to a stop, and I could hear the sirens in the distance. I guess someone had called the authorities. I helped the other passengers calm down as best I could, but I couldn't shake off that feeling of dread. Those guys, the masks, the chaos, it was like something out of a nightmare I wish I never had. You won't believe what happened to me one night when I was working as a subway cleaner. So, I'm just doing my regular job, mopping the floor and making sure everything is clean. It's a bit late, and the station is pretty empty. I'm going about my business when I notice this guy, kinda scruffy looking, standing at the end of the platform. He's just staring at me, and I get this weird feeling in my gut, like something's off. But you know, I figure he's just waiting for a train or something, so I keep on cleaning. As I'm mopping, I notice he starts walking towards me, all slow and deliberate. I try to act like I don't notice, but I can feel my heart pounding. He gets closer, and I see this girl with him. She looks scared, like really scared. I can't help but think, what's going on here? He comes up to me and starts talking, but his voice is all low and intense. He's saying something to the effect of how they need to leave and how he's trying to protect her. It's like he's trying to convince her to go with him, but she's shaking her head and looking at me with pleading eyes. I'm just frozen, not knowing what to do. The guy's grip on the girl's arm tightens, and she lets out this little whimper. My heart's racing even faster now, and I'm telling myself to stay calm, but it's like my body isn't listening. Then, out of nowhere, the guy's face changes. It's like he's angry, and his eyes are wild. He's still holding on to the girl, but now he's looking at me with this intense rage. I'm scared out of my mind, and I drop the mop, taking a step back. The girl starts pulling away from him, and that's when he lets go. She stumbles back, and that's when I see it, a bruise on her arm, like he's been hurting her. I'm horrified, but I can't move. She's looking at me, and I can see tears in her eyes. Suddenly, she turns and starts running towards the stairs that lead up to the street. The guy yells something, and for a moment, I think he's coming after her. But he stops and just watches her go, this mix of anger and frustration on his face. I'm left standing there, my heart still racing, and I watch as the girl disappears up the stairs. The guy stands there for a few more seconds, and then he turns and walks the other way, disappearing into the darkness of the subway tunnel. I wish I could say that I did something, that I went after the girl or called the police, but I was so scared and shocked that I just stood there. Eventually, I managed to call my supervisor and tell him what happened, and they called the police. I don't know what happened to that girl or the guy. The police asked me questions and took my statement, but I never heard anything else about it. All I know is that night really shook me up. I never expected something like that to happen while I was just doing my job in a quiet subway station.